Welcome to Across the Park podcast, the only place you can hear banter and debate from both sides of Stanley Park, whether it be blue or red. Sponsored by Their Clothing, Camper Kings UK, and affiliation with BetMate. Hello and welcome to Across the Park Extra. Myself, Ian Mills, with Gary Judge for an Everton FC special. Sometimes on these extras we strike gold. We certainly have tonight. The man whose name is still sung around the pubs on a match day. It's sung on every away coach, every away end, and even still sung in the Gladys Street. The Everton number 10 for the greatest Everton team of all time. It is, of course, Mr. Andy Gray. Mr. Andy Gray, thank you for joining us on Across the Park. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ian. Gary, thanks very much. Really well. I thought you were introducing someone else there at the beginning. I don't recognise that introduction. I must have got the wrong number. But no, thank you for those kind words.
No.
I'm okay. I'm in quarantine at the moment. I'm down at Birmingham, near Birmingham Airport. I've had to come back from Qatar to have a little manipulation on a knee I had replaced about 12 weeks ago, just to finish it off. So I'm having that done on Tuesday. So at the moment, I am in quarantine until tomorrow night.
Still got the footy injuries, Andy.
I think it's remnants. Somebody did tell me that you eventually, Andy, it will catch up with you. You were right. I mean, I had a hip replaced 4 years ago. I had my knee replaced 12 weeks ago. But honestly, guys, if somebody had told me when I was 17, these are the price. This is the kind of price you'll have to pay when you're older. Do you still want to go ahead and do it? Yeah, the answer would have been yeah,
right,
and double time.
Thank God for that.
Right. The plan is, Andy, on our Across the Park extras, is we just talk about your Everton career timeline, if that's okay. So we'll start in November 1983. The large sum of £200,000 was paid to Wolves, who I believe were in financial trouble at the time, that they had no choice but to accept that offer. And you signed for Everton Football Club. What are your memories of that time period? Wolves telling you the interest, Howard Kendall calling you, and of course the decision to sign for Everton?
At that time, guys, I mean, I was coming up 29, like just before my 29th birthday, 83, 28th birthday, I think, yeah. And we were going down again. Wolves were going down again. We'd just come up and we're having a struggle first few months of the season. And I wasn't sure where I was going. I had no idea. I didn't know whether the good days were over. The good days were finished. There were some great old pros there at Wolves. John Richards, Willie Card, Kenny Hibbett were amazing footballers, great professionals, absolutely top class. But they were all 30 plus, and I was coming up to my 30s, and I had no idea whether I could still hack it at the very highest level. That's a genuine, honest opinion. The club went into liquidation. I was an asset, one of the few they had, although it wasn't an expensive asset. I have to say. Gone were the days of the record transfers. That was that had gone 4 years before. But I was in a position where I really didn't know what was happening. I went training I think it was a Thursday. Yeah, and I think it was the Thursday, and after training, we'd got beaten the week before. Me, Kenny Hibbett, as we did after training, went down the pub and we were discussing. Might have been Wednesday. We were discussing what the hell happens. What do we do? This is a bloody nightmare. How are we going to get out of this? And I went home and I got a call from Wolves to come straight back in. So it could have been a Wednesday, Thursday, and Everton had put in a bid for me. Did I want to speak to them? It didn't take me long in fact, it took me no time to say I'll be straight in, because it was one of those things, and I had no idea what I was joining at Everton, because we weren't exactly pulling up trees at Goodison at those days as well. There was a struggle going on there, so I was leaving one struggling club really for another, but another that I think had better potential, and I thought I needed a change. So I quickly said, yeah, okay, I'll go talk to Howard. And I went up and met Howard on the Friday, met at Queen's Drive, pub on Queen's Drive, just near the training ground where it was then. And we had a chat, and he said he'd like me to join. I said, love to. and we agreed pretty quickly that was going to be the way it was going. I was going to be Everton, and that basically was how the signing went. It was quite quick, quite clean. There were no arguments about anything at all. I wanted to come. Howard wanted me. He was under pressure, of course, then, as everyone knows, with results that we'd had, and people were protesting and saying that, this is terrible, Kendall must go, and things like that. And it's astonishing to think now what was going on then in that November. So I knew I wasn't joining a club in its peak of form, let's just say, and full of confidence. I was joining a club that was struggling for confidence and lacking in belief and what have you. But I needed a change. I needed to get away from Wolves. I'd been there 4 years. There were traumatic years on and off the pitch with the liquidation and everything that went wrong there. Change of ownership 2 or 3 times in the 4 years, I think. So I needed to get away. And I did, and I was delighted to be able to join Everton.
Was that your first time, Andy, that you met Howard Kendall? And if so, how did you find him straight away?
No, I'd known Howard as a player. I played against Howard
when
he was at Birmingham, for instance. He was at Birmingham for a while, and I was at Villa. And I remember playing against Howard on many occasions then. But I didn't know him as such. So my first genuine conversation with him of any note was that day at Queen's, when I met him at Queen's Drive. To sit down, have a bit of lunch, and discuss what we were doing. And I liked him right away. He was basically still a player. He'd only just given up player managing, really, hadn't he? I think the year before he was still trying to get the boots on and play. Eventually decided that enough is enough. And he was basically still a player. So we were talking on very similar lines. He was only about, he could only have been, if I was 28, he could only have been about 6 or 7 years older than me, maybe 8, don't know. So, there was a player-to-player conversation going on there as much as a player-to-coach. And we got on really well. I liked his enthusiasm. I loved his attitude. It's infectious. He liked mine. We got on really well from minute one. I think he knew what he was buying personality-wise, and somebody who liked winning and wanted to win at all costs. He didn't know what he was buying ability-wise, and to be honest with you, neither did I. I didn't know what he was buying, because it had been so long since I actually felt, I'm a good player. I can still play and I can do it. So it had been a while since I felt that. So we knew what we were getting. We knew what we were getting into. It was just a case of getting through the medical, which was a little less straightforward than the chat.
When myself and Gary first watched the Howard's Way documentary, which I'm sure we'll get into, it was such an amazing emotional film. But one of the moments that made us laugh was your story about collecting your own medical records and sort of thinking some of these can't make it up the M60.
Guilty as charged, yes. It was funny. It was just, can you imagine that happening now? There's a big transfer going on and a player gets told, go pick up your medical records, take them up tomorrow when you go. So I did, and it is a true story. I went home, and this pile was it must have been 46 inches thick, right? With all different injuries I'd had over my career. And I'd played for 11 years then, so I did quite a few. And they kept them all. And I thought, I can't take that up. They'll never bloody sign me. I can dump this on the docks table. Doc Irvin's just going to go, I don't think so, Andy. So I went home and I had an open fire. And it is true, I sat there and I went, right, that's not going in the fire. Right, that's not going in the fire. Oh, I never suffer from that, in the fire. And all of a sudden, this 46 inches was reduced to a 1-inch thick dossier that I took up to the doc. And he opened the doc, said, have you got your medical records? I said, yeah, there they are, doc. Thanks very much. I was told to bring them up. He went, oh. He said, I don't know why. I had visions of this being much thicker than this. I said, popular misconception, doc. You know what people they exaggerate injuries, and I've not been as injured nearly as much as you think. I thought, I'm not letting it go. And my knee was swollen. I remember the medical. We had played, I know where it was now, we had played at Preston, I think, for Wolves in the League Cup. Do you believe that? On a Tuesday night. Piss and wet rain. Sorry if I piss and wet rain.
That's fine.
Right. Horrible night. I think we might have got beaten I don't know, but I had played the cup tie where I shouldn't, and my knee was swollen. I went up on the Friday, and the doc looked at my knee and went, "Oh wow." He said, "That's it's got a bit of fluid in it, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "So if we don't sign you, what happens on Saturday?" I said, "Well, I'll be playing for Wolves." He said, "You'll be playing with that?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be playing with this." I said, "That'll go down tomorrow. Just it comes and goes." He went, "Oh, I like that." He says, so he went and talked to Howard about it, and Howard went, "Get him signed." And the doc came back and said, "Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that." And that was that. And that was the reason I was cup tied, because I played in this one poxy League Cup tie in a wet, horrible night. I think it was Preston. And it meant I was League Cup tied. Stupid rule that anyway. They should get rid of that.
Well, Andy, obviously, as you said, you did come to sign for a struggling Everton side. It's definitely fair to say that, but it was full of players, again, like you said, that had potential and that were to become Everton legends. Southall, Radcliffe, Mountfield. You could name all of them. But for one reason or another, it hadn't happened at that time. When you first arrived at Belfield, you start training with the players. You've obviously been with Wolves for a few years. Could you see that potential?
I certainly, when I trained with the boys, could see the potential. And I mean, and even those first few months, the team was vastly different from the one that was going to go on and sweep all in front of it. We still had, Howard had his problem of, who do I make my number one? Is it Jim Arnold? Is it Big Nev? And I remember they used to flip-flop them an awful lot. Jim would get a game, then Nev would get a game, then Jim would play, then Nev would play. And he wasn't quite sure which way to go. Mark Higgins was still there, but he got injured and had fallen out the side. Never really got back in it. John Bailey was still there. Of course, Nash was doing his stuff at left back. Andy King, God rest his soul, was playing. Terry Curran was another one who was playing regularly as well. These were all players who were there that time, but would play not a big part in a year later. If even they were all still there a year later, which I doubt. Alan Irvin, another one, Swerve, who played a big part when I first came. But then, I could see the young boys on training, when you're training with people like Gary Stephen, Trevor Stephen, Kevin Sheedy in particular, Graham Sharp, Adrian Heath, you think, wow, why the hell is this? And I used to say that to Reedy, why the hell are we struggling here? I've seen the talent in these guys. They're doing things with football that I could only dream of doing. I said, what the hell? Why are we bottom 4 or 5 of the league when we've got these kids to call on? And I think it was just a matter of the right time, just evolving. But those first couple of months up until, I would say, Boxing, Christmas, New Year time, around about the turn of the year, when whether a switch flicked, whatever it was, something happened. Howard settled into a side, settled with Big Nev in goal, settled with Rats, who was hardly getting a game.
Yeah.
I mean, the skipper, the most successful skipper ever, was a job in left back, who was in and out the team when I first arrived, sitting in the stands some weeks, playing at left back, other weeks playing at centre back. All of a sudden, he's centre back and becomes one of the best in Everton's history. And him and Derek had a magnificent partnership together, blindingly quick, tough to beat, and terrific footballers. And so it was taking a bit of time, but certainly those first couple of months, I kind of wondered, there's talent here. It's just whether Howard and Colin and Mick Heaton in particular could unlock it.
Well, going to push it a bit further there. So, as you've said, the first few months were difficult. Games in particular against Coventry and Sunderland, low crowds, boos. I think it was 1 goal in 8. I think at first for yourself.
Yeah.
During that period, did you ever wonder whether that was the right move, whether it was a mistake? No,
I didn't, because I was enjoying myself enormously. I bounced into training every day at Belfield. Loved going out there on the pitch. Training was fun. It was hard though, but it was fun and serious. And no, so I never doubted that. I wondered, would it change? Of course I did. But I was seeing these guys, these young boys, every day at training. I was watching them, and I knew that there was so much talent there that I didn't worry. What would I worry about? I'm playing at Everton, magnificent football team. We're struggling, admittedly. The crowds were down. I think the Coventry game, it was under 10,000.
Yeah.
For that Coventry game. And the boos that rang out, I'll never forget them. The boos that rang out, God Almighty, that was one of the worst games I've ever played in. And I have to say, if I'd have been watching that, I'd have been booing as well. It was that bad. No, I would have. It was that bad. But
sounds like this season, Andy.
no, it's not bad. No, it's not as bad. Don't be silly. We were a lot worse than that. Don't you worry about that. We came back from a lot deeper in the depths than this team will have to do. No, and no, I never doubted it though. And the one thing about me is I think my influence on the team, like Reedy's, was an awful lot about what we did to other players, how we helped other players. You know, I remember Graham Souness saying to me many years ago when we played, he says, you're only as good as your senior players. If they're not right, if they're not the right kind, you'll never be a good team. And I often wondered what he meant. And it was only when I became 28, Reedy was about 28 as well, 29, and these young players were coming up. If we'd have been the wrong type, you know, if Reedy and I didn't bother about winning, and we didn't care about winning, and if we won, we won. If we didn't, we didn't. No, winning was everything. And I think these young guys picked up on it. The young players picked up on the fact that, you know what, quite like winning, actually. It's much better than losing. And I think that began to filtrate into the personality of the guys.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it was, Andy, about the year changing from 83 to 84, but something changed within that football club. Now, some Evertonians will say Birmingham, some will say Stoke, some will say Oxford, others will say the Milk Cup final. Let's concentrate on the first part there, Birmingham away, and then Stoke in the cup, where the tale goes that Howard opened the windows and you as players heard the supporters singing and chanting. Those two games there, Birmingham and Stoke, what are your memories of those two games?
I know a lot's done of Oxford, and of course it is, because, you know, Inch's goal kept us going in that competition. We didn't win it, right? So I think it was a big goal, yes. But I actually think the two games you mentioned were bigger, and I think more pivotal, in my opinion, as a player. Because I remember Howard coming in against Birmingham beforehand and saying, and I mentioned a lot of the players that we've talked about, and he said that, right, this is it. We'd obviously been on a bad run. I think he made me skipper a couple of days before at Wolves and we got hammered 3-0, which is probably as low as we've been. And I think he'd come to the end of his tether and he'd come in and said, right, he said, I put a lot of trust in this group and believed we could do it. If it doesn't happen today, then there'll be, I've got to change everything. And we went and beat them 2-0 with St Andrews. That gave us a bit of breathing space. Bounced into the cup tie. It's in the history books what happened. The windows opened. The noise was deafening. You're not going to let these boys down, are you? And you thought, nah, we're not going to let these fans down. Absolutely not. And there was two tough away games. You know, those weren't easy games. I mean, I know now if people are listening thinking, well, Birmingham and Stoke away from home. They're easy. No, they weren't easy games. Not in 84, 83, 84. Those weren't easy games. They were tough places to go to, particularly Stoke, and get a victory. And I think those two games, the league match and the cup tie, were, in my opinion, were two of the biggest wins we put together. And for some reason, they gave us a confidence to bounce from them into the new year. And the confidence just seemed to rise and rise and rise, and we just began to get better and better and better. And Howard kept just tweaking the team a little bit, giving the young boys their head, easing out people like Terry Curran that day. Terry, he did play a huge part that season, but maybe less and less as Trevor and Kevin Sheedy were beginning to say, we should be playing, boss. You can't leave us out. And they were right. And Derek Mountfield and Rats were saying, yeah, I'm sorry, you can't leave us out. You can't leave Neville out. And that's what happened. The team settled. And it was just a case of, you know, there was me, Inchy, Sharpie, 2 into 3 didn't go. It was tough on one of us who weren't going to play. You know, in midfield, you were always going to have Reedy. But then there was Kevin Richards and Alan Harper. I mean, I felt for Alan that year because such a good player, and yet him and Kevin didn't play nearly as many games as their talent deserved. You know, they were much more talented, the amount of games or starts that they played, but they were so important to us. I mean, I watched the game last night, a cup final, and I watched Manchester United playing Villarreal, and Villarreal made their five substitutions within about 80 minutes. United never made a substitution till stoppage extra time, and they looked knackered by the time we got to the end of the 90 minutes. And I'll tell you why. I think because Solskjaer knew his best team was on the pitch.
Right.
And the players he looked behind him, when he looked behind him, he said, right, who can change this game for me? I don't think he saw anybody who he thought was as good as what was on the pitch. What Howard could do, there wasn't many two subs in those days, was it? Back then for us. Howard could look round and see Kevin Richardson and Alan Harper and know he could take any player off and those two would be equally as good.
Right.
And that was a massive for us. And that we didn't become a worse team when Richo and Harpo played. No, we didn't. We were equally as good with either or both of them in the side.
You say there that Howard was under pressure, and you're right. When you came in, the pressure was building. The Coventry game, Sunderland game, and then I think the Oxford game. Looking back, the media were expecting Oxford to beat Everton, and that would be the final nail. Around Belfield, what was Howard like around that period? Was he showing pressure, or did he not change? No. How was he?
No, good coaches don't. However they feel when they're in their office, however they feel when they're at home with their family, however they feel when they're talking to the coaches alone, and the coaches are there with him when he was sat with Colin and Mick Heaton and discussing what was going on, and Terry Darracott, they might have been sat there thinking, oh, yeah. But when you work with players, the players cannot tune into that. They cannot walk onto a training ground and see the gaffer down or miserable and Colin scratching his head and going all this. No, you have to walk onto a training ground and your coaches have to be the bubbliest, brightest, most positive people that you're going to work with on that day. And they were. And that was a strength that they had. No matter how bad it was, that never transmitted from the stands to the staff to us. It went from the terraces to the staff and stopped there. We had our own pressure. Of course we did to try and play. But Howard and Colin and Mick Heaton and Terry Darracott, they never put added pressure on us. And we never felt Howard was any different from the man who was 12 months later going to be sweeping all in front of him. He was the same personality-wise, he was the same. But I bet you, away from the training ground, away from Goodison, he probably did carry the weight of the world on his shoulders at times. But he never transmitted that to the training ground. And that was one of his strengths.
Lanzi, another significant game, or massively significant game, because it was against our lovable rivals, Liverpool at Wembley, was the Milk Cup. Milk Cup final. Now, obviously, you weren't involved in that game in particular, and it ultimately ends in defeat for us. But because of the way the game plays out, you know, the way that we kind of went toe-to-toe with them and we showed we could compete, did you feel in the dressing room that the players got a lift from that?
Yeah, before that game, I think what was an important game for that final, I think, was the league match we played at Goodison. I think we played that before the final, 1-1, remember?
Yeah.
Did Harpo score the equaliser second half?
Yeah.
I think he did. I remember playing, that was my first derby. And I remember the first half, Liverpool battered us. It was men and boys. And I think we'd lost just a week before I signed. We'd get beat 3-0 at Anfield that same season. It was just about a week, 10 days before I signed. Came to the next game and we went in at half time and I couldn't believe what I'd seen. They were just, it was like men and boys. And Reedy and I sort of got together and said, we need to noise our boys up. And we did. And I went out and smacked a couple of Liverpool players very sharpish after the start of the second half, just to noise people up. I never tried to win the ball, just rattled into, I think it was Alan Hansen and Mark Lawrenson, it might have been, that were playing that night. And just started getting fired in. So did Reedy. And suddenly all the boys started to go, well, we got to join this.
That's what we do,
all of a sudden, the tempo came up and we were playing better and we had them under pressure. Harpo got a magnificent equaliser. And I think that 45 minutes, for the ones that had played in the 3-0 game and had been not humiliated, but beaten badly, they suddenly had a belief that, hold on a minute, we can cope with this. We can go toe-to-toe with this magnificent Liverpool team and not be afraid of them. And I think the guys took that into the League Cup final without a doubt. From the minute they arrived, from that game to the League Cup final, the confidence just grew and grew and grew. And we were so unlucky not to win at Wembley. And the days of VAR, which we hate, I hate enormously, that Alan Hansen would have been given away a penalty with that deliberate handball, whether it was deliberate or not, the shot was going in and Jockey handled it. And we never got a penalty for that. Now, that might have made all the difference.
Yeah.
But I think that gave the guys the young players particularly, or lads who had never been in a final, amazing belief to take into the rest of the season and finish as strongly as we did.
But we're back to the FA Cup, and before we get to the semi-final, just want to talk about that header goal against Notts County. Talk us through that one. How and why did you header it?
Because I'm mad. I don't know, guys. I mean, I watch football a lot these days, and I don't know about you, but it's physics about for me when I watch it now. Because if a ball comes flashing across goal and you stretch your leg out to get it, it's only you're only going to get so far. But if you dive at it, if it's 2-3 feet off the ground, you're going to get a lot further, a lot quicker. I mean, it's just natural what happens there.
We'll have to introduce an Andy Gray long jump into the Olympics.
By the way, the long jump wouldn't get very far these days. But no, I remember that. I think it was Sheeds took the free kick, and I think that the first thing that happened was I was surprised it got to me, because I think it was a wee bit flatter than I thought. So at first I didn't think it was going to reach me, and then as it came over the players, it was like instinct.
You're already like perched.
I never dreamt to try and get it with my feet, because I didn't think I'd get enough on it, sliding in like that and just catching it. So I thought, I never thought anything. I mean, I'm sitting here saying to you, I thought. No, I didn't. What am I saying? I never thought. I thought bugger all. I just got there, and I thought the only way I could get to it is to dive at it. And I mean, as it happens, it was like a half volley. It just bounced just before I got it. And I think it must have been surprise as much as anything that beat the goalie. He probably thought, what the hell?
That lunatic doing?
What happened just there? But it was a good contact, and it had enough pace in it to take it past the keeper and into the net. So it was very enjoyable, I have to say.
Okay, so Andy, the scenes at Highbury for the FA Cup semi-final win when we won in the 117th minute, right the way through to, look at the Howard's Way documentary again, showing you lads on the coach and waving to the fans. But before then, I'm interested to know, as a player, what is that period like? Because us as a club, our form didn't drop. We won the last 3. We drew with United. But you as a player, are you sort of just dying to get to the cup final, or is it still game to game, week to week for you?
That year was, I mean, it would be wrong for me to sit here and say it was just game to game. It felt like it was just game to game. It felt like we didn't put any extra emphasis on the FA Cup, but I think in reality we probably did, because the boys had lost the League Cup a couple of months before. It made them more determined than ever to get back to Wembley in the FA Cup, and obviously because I missed that game, it made me doubly determined that I was going to be part of Wembley. Yeah. So we had all that. And we just played. We went out. I don't think we ever coasted in any game. I don't think I can remember a game where we thought, we're good enough to just coast through this one and we can win this. And if we don't win, it doesn't matter. That wouldn't have been allowed to happen, and it didn't happen. And we just played, and we went and played as we should and as we did. But when we arrived there, we were still pretty much the underdogs, I think, when we took on Southampton, even though our form was really good. We were on a really good run, but they had a team full of experience. I mean, packed with experience. People like Mick Mills and Frank Worthington and one of the Wallace boys. They were all vastly more experienced than us. The manager was more experienced than Howard. The big Laurie was. Oh, you got a pint of lager there?
Yeah, sorry.
A pint of lager. How dare you put a pint of lager on your lips?
Listen, I've watched Howard's Way. I'm just trying to pay tribute to you, Andy, and that team.
In quarantine here. A scandal. You upset my train of thought now. But they had Big Laurie, who was massively experienced as a coach, far more than Howard. And so I think everyone thought, it'd be tough for Everton to keep this going. And in fairness, it was a game where Big Nev again made a couple of amazing stops, when we needed him, came in when we needed him. And you didn't know, but I think as we did in games, apart from the FA Cup final the following year, we always seemed to get stronger as the game went on. And we never felt like that tiredness. We still went at it, and we still went at them. And when, as you say, with 3 minutes to go, and then she nicks that little header from one of the worst free kicks Reedy's ever hit in his life. I mean, he keeps telling me he spotted Derek Mountfield coming in near post. And, no, he never. He mishit it. He mishit it, and I think it was Big Derek that got a touch on it at the near post. And it was coming. I remember it coming bouncing through, and I was behind Inchie. I didn't see him at first. And I thought, I'm going to get this. And we're only about 2 yards out, and then the little man just popped up in front of me and just headed it into the net. And of course, the scenes were just mind blowing. But the scenes beforehand were exactly the same. When you talked about Stoke earlier,
yeah.
But the scenes at Highbury, I don't know if you remember old Highbury, where the dressing rooms were. You could open the windows at Highbury, and you're on the street.
The main road, yeah.
The main road, where all the fans gathered. And of course, it was all Evertonians that were there. There was a couple of pubs across the road, packed with Evertonians. So we were at the windows, waving at everybody. And I was waving at my family. I had family down there, spotted them, and I'm waving at them out the window. And it was just reminiscent of what happened at Stoke. And that was a really good, I felt then that was a good omen. You know, we opened the windows and it was just Evertonians everywhere. You could see a Southampton fan everywhere. And I thought, that's a good omen. That's Stoke all over again. And it was a tough game. And it wasn't a great game, but I've always said about semi-finals, you never want to lose a semi-final. No one ever remembers losing a semi-finalist, ever. And the one game I've always said, I don't care how bad you play. If you come through it and you've won it and you're in the final, job's done. We didn't play great that day, but as always, we were hard to beat by then. We solid at the back, never gave much away, and we had the best goalkeeper in the world. His reputation was growing on a weekly basis, and that gave us a good foundation to know that if we got one, we're more than likely would win the game, because we weren't really going to concede many. And that was a thing on the day. Wasn't a great game, but who cares? The journey back, though, up that motorway was something we'll never forget. Anyone who was in our coach, it was just how 50 Everton coaches never fell over. I'll never know. I'll never know. Because every time we went past it, because by then we'd had a few beers and Howard had got loads in the coach, and we're celebrating and going to Wembley. So we're going past everybody. We're all happy. We're jumping about our coach, and you'd go past and the guys sitting, you know, just probably a wee bit weary from the day with the baby and what had gone on. They were a little bit dozy at the window, head against the window, and they'd look up bleary-eyed and see us go past, and we're all up with that, and they'd suddenly realise, that's Everton. That's the boys. And the next minute, the whole coach was up, and they were all at the window on the right-hand side of the coaches. And we were all going, get back, you'll tilt it. And how a coach never tilted over, I'll never know. But we must have passed 100 coaches on the way up there. It was an amazing journey back.
Well, speaking of the team becoming hard to beat, and obviously Big Nevin there giving you that added security, takes us on to the final and the eventual 2-0 victory with a proper Andy Gray goal in there as well. For you personally, looking back at that game, you know, how did that feel? You know, lifting the trophy at Wembley and obviously getting that trophy under your belt.
Well, if you're a Scot, and I am, the one thing you did at my age, you saw one game every year, and it was FA Cup final basically. It was only a live game you saw as I was growing up as a kid, and I wanted to be a footballer, so I obviously wanted to play in an FA Cup final. That was a dream of mine, and that was part one. Part two was to score in it. Part three was to win it. There was no use doing 1 and 2 without 3. So it was amazing for me to feel that I was going there now. The boys had been there in the League Cup. They'd just come up short, and we were going back again. But I remember in the build-up, and I can remember the young boys doing their interviews, and I know we're playing Watford, and I think we'd been in a couple of decent games against Watford this year. Was that the year we went on 5-4 or something?
I think it was, yeah.
Good side, yeah.
I mean, they had, you know, people like John Barnes or mugs, and we'd been in really high scoring games against them, but I think we'd always beaten them. And of course, I'm walking about Belfield and I see Inchie and maybe Trevor Stephen or Gary Stevens or Sheeds doing interviews, and they're going, "Yeah, Watford, not a problem to us. Yeah, we'll beat them. This might as well be their cup final because they're not winning this." And I'm going, "Oh, don't say that, guys. Come on." I'm trying to be level-headed. Me and Reed go, "Lads, no, just say it's going to be tight. It's going to be close." You know, you can't walk about saying, "We have done. They get 2, we'll get 3. If they get 3, we'll get 4. We don't care." That was the kind of attitude and belief that was suddenly at Belfield pre-cup final, and that didn't matter what they did. They got 1, we'd have got 2. They'd have got 2, we'd have got 3. That's what the way the guys felt. That's the way that these boys felt, and there was no hiding it from them because they were young, and they wanted the world to know that they felt good. And I'm thinking, oh, please let's not have anything go wrong today. But in all honesty, in the build after the semi-final, you know, it wasn't a case of just seeing the season out and getting to the final. We wanted to finish the season well, and sort of make a mark so we could take it into the season after. It wasn't a case of, we'll just fall away now and let everybody beat us. That wasn't the case. But the FA Cup final was what we wanted. Of course it was. And we'd lifted our league season. We climbed the league. And we were up in the top half of the league as well, I think, by then. Pretty sure we were. And, you know, things were looking really bright for the first time in a lot of years. You know, Evertonians like yourselves, well, one of you, like yourself, have...
both Blues here.
Yeah,
Blues.
This is a 100 Everton podcast. That's a very, very naughty accusation, that Mr. Gray.
Yeah, I apologise. I mean, it was a website that
It
was a website that confused me. Anyway, but yeah, I think even you guys, and I don't know if you're old enough, but certainly your father and people like that, your family, they must have begun to believe. I got the opinion that the feeling around the city. For the first time in a long time, Evertonians were holding their heads up. Evertonians were out in the street with their chests out, thinking, "All right, you're good, Liverpool, but so are we, and we're happy. We can now get on a level playing field with you, and we're not frightened of you. We respect you. Of course we do. You can't not respect a team that did what they did and was doing what they do. But we're up there. We believe we're going to get there." And I think Evertonians themselves began, and that kind of feeling spread through not only the players but the fans as well. And that's the way it was going up to the cup final. And although I didn't think the cup final was a formality, I thought we were miles better than them. I don't mean in the day, but before we went on the pitch, I thought we had better players all over the pitch than them. I thought we were quicker than them, stronger than them, and I thought their players. Not Graham Taylor, but I thought their players felt by getting there, that was their final. They might argue with me and say, "No, we didn't. We wanted to win it." Of course, you wanted to win it, but I actually felt that it was more important for us. We had a bigger desire to win it, I think, than they did that day.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm referencing the amazing Howard's Way, and I watched this again with my father-in-law the other weekend, and he was nearly holding back tears whilst he smiled. And two big players in that 84-85 season, Pat Van Howe and Paul Bracewell, who came in 1984. Now, some of the scenes in that DVD, it shows them massively part of the camaraderie and the team spirit. Was that instant? Did they instantly gravitate to the players and you gravitated back to them?
If you didn't fit in, you didn't stay. It was as simple as that. I'll use the new word that everyone used, the group. If you didn't fit in with the group, then you didn't stay. If you didn't prepare to go that extra yard for your mate, you didn't stay. Paul Bracewell will tell you about the pre-season. We took him away that year and he signed. And he couldn't catch his breath and he wanted to get to bed. And we dragged him out for a few bevies and a few more and a few more. And that was his introduction. He'll talk
initiation.
About, if you talk to Brace, he'll talk about that first trip he went away to Greece. I think it was Greece we went to, and how he thought, wow, I've joined something here. Pat was never a worry. You know, he wasn't called Psycho for no good reason. And I loved Pat. I loved Brace. I mean, they were two magnificent additions. And listen, you know, it was sad in many ways for a lot of reasons. You know, John Bailey was the one who suffered that year.
Yeah.
Bales has just blew Everton through and through. You know, one of the best lads you're ever going to meet. Fantastic boy, great pro, good player. But Howard thought, I've got to move it on.
Yeah.
And he was prepared to do that. And I should know more than most, because 12 months later he did the same with me.
Yeah.
So it was sad to see Bales take less a part of it, but Pat was so good. I mean, so good. He did make the back four better. He was a pure athlete, and he was a nasty bastard as well. Sorry.
That's fine.
He was nasty, and I loved it about him. He was competitive, and you talk to him, and he talks about winning, and he says, "I've never known a team want to win as much as this team when I joined them," and he was right. And he joined up, and Brace joined up as well. I think Brace and Reedy were magnificent, and in the middle of that midfield. But they were two big signings. I said to you, because I think in that middle, that beside Reedy at the end of that season, as I said to you, there was Harpo, there was Kevin Richardson, really, really good players. But Howard saw something in Brace that said to him, you know, yeah, I don't want to lose Kevin, don't want to use Harpo, but I've got to get Bracewell in, because he's a player, he's the one that will be perfect fit for Reedy.
Yeah.
And he was right again. And he was a perfect fit. And you know, his career shows you that. His history at Everton shows you that. What a great player he was.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned how great he was, and there's no doubt in that. But a man who's in Everton folklore still, and he left in summer 1984, was Mr. Andy King. God rest his soul. He was an absolute favourite of the Gladys Street. Andy is our king. I think you played maybe 6 months with him. Yeah. What was Andy King like on and off the pitch?
Mad as a box of frogs. He was Kingy. Look, we love Kingy. He was a huge personality, as you guys know more than better than I. A massive personality, infectious. Thought he was the best player in the world. Nothing wrong with that. And you know, the fact that Howard began to leave him out affected him. I remember he walked out a team meeting once when Howard left him out, disappeared. And that was basically the beginning and the end, I think, of him at Goodison. But I think, God rest his soul, I think if he was here now, he would tell you what he wishes he'd have stayed. Even to play the same kind of part as Richo and Alan Harper. He could have been part of it. He should have been part of it because of what he went through leading up to it. Yeah. You know, he was there through all the frustrating years. Yeah. You know, when things weren't going right and it was tough. And then that lot across the road were sweeping everything, and Kingy was working his balls off trying to make things happen. Oh, excuse me, lads, I'm not going
to... No worries. No worries.
Get off. That's gone off. Right. Anyway, sorry about that.
No worries.
That's scandalous.
I think it's 1-1 now. It's 1-1 now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if he was here and you would say to Kingy, "Do you wish you'd have stayed?" I think he would probably say, "Yeah, I wish I'd have stayed. I wish I'd have stayed and been part of the next couple of years and all that went with it."
Yeah.
But he didn't. He was a strong personality, Kingy, and he felt hurt that he was going down the pecking order. He felt, and he felt a move would be the best thing for him. And maybe at the time it was, but I do believe, I think he would wish now that he had stayed and been part of that. However small a part, you would think it would have been a big part, because he was part of the seeds being planted and everything grown from there.
Yeah.
Well, you spoke, Andy, about the pre-season and the trip to Greece, etc. We've obviously had quite a few of the 80s players on who spoke about Howard and his methods. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about what pre-season was like under Howard, apart from the social side of it. What was he like as a coach in terms of preparing you for the season? Was it heavy fitness? Was it balls out, etc.?
Well, what amazed me, because obviously I joined in November, I never had a pre-season with him, and then coming round after we'd won the FA Cup and we had climbed up the league to a really respectable position, and sort of gave a little bit of notice of what could come next year. I arrived at pre-season on the back of having worked with coaches that worked you really hard. I mean, really hard. Days without a football to work on fitness and endurance. And I thought, okay, they're the same. We're not far from the coast. A lot of nice beaches around Southport and Formby. I said, we'll probably be up and down sand dunes. So when I turned up for the first day of pre-season and Howard had the balls out, I was gobsmacked. Balls were out from day one. No point. His attitude was, what's the point in training when you're not training with the tool you work with, which is the football, from day one. And we had the balls out from day one. It was fantastic. It was eye-opening for me. And remember, I'm 29, so I've been around a lot. I've played football for 12 years, and I'd never started pre-season day one with a football, never. And it was a joy. It was hard, but nothing wrong with being hard, But the fact that we had the footballs out on day one was just was music to my ears, and I absolutely loved it. The hard work was done with the ball. Nice.
Way ahead of his time there, wasn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. As I say, I worked with some coaches who, wouldn't let you see a ball. Certainly for about a week, you'd be doing heavy, hard endurance stuff to get the heart and lungs going and the legs. And then as you eased off the heavy stuff, you'd get into the short sprints and the work with the ball then. But no, Howard's belief was, no, we've got 4 weeks or whatever it was, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. We want the football out. And he got it out day one. Brilliant. I walked in, the training session was set up, and I went, what the ball's doing there? I think it might have been Colin went, well, we're working with the balls this morning. Oh, bring it on. Lovely. Yeah, very good.
Interesting before, Andy, that you mentioned 2 into 3, yourself, Graham Sharp and Adrian Heath. And at the start of that 84-85 season, I think you had some injury problems. You came back in at Newcastle. Graham Sharp was dropped. Then Adrian Heath suffered that terrible injury near the end of the year. I think it was December of 84. But before then, when there was 3 fit players competing for 2 shirts, was it a healthy rivalry? Were there arguments? What was it like?
There wasn't arguments between us, but I'll never forget. I mean, at the beginning of that season, I had started that season, I think, injured. I missed the Charity Shield, as it was called then, because I was carrying a little injury and we wanted to get it right for the season. Now, and they started with Inchie and Sharpie. Then Howard made his mind up when I was fit. And this is what I mean about fate, sometimes in football, and how he makes up his mind, like he made with Jim Arnold and Neville. He chose Neville. Great decision. I think at Newcastle, in that game, he made up his mind he was going to play me and Inchie. He felt that was a better combination than Sharpie and me, for instance. And Sharpie was less than happy. And in fact, I talked him out of putting in a transfer request that day. I'll never forget that. Oh. He was so disappointed, so annoyed. No room for me here. And he says, I'm off. I'm not staying around here to play a bit. And I get it, because it's such a great season the season before. They started to show us his potential on a regular basis. And I said to him, Sharpie, please don't do anything today. Don't say anything to Howard. Why, I'm going to tell him. No, don't, I says, because you never know. I said, football changes quickly. I said, so please don't do that. And he went, all right. I said, promise me. He said, I won't mention, I won't do anything. I went, good. As it transpires, I do my metatarsal that day. And I'm out for 8 weeks. And the time I get back, Sharpie and Inchie become the best 2 front men in the country. Never mind. They become the best 2 in England. So that was fate. It might have changed if I hadn't got injured. Who knows? There's all these little things that go to making a great story in football. But I did get injured. That was Inchie's fault, by the way, that injury.
Really?
He did. We were playing against Newcastle, and Glenn Roeder I think it was Glenn, God rest his soul again. Glenn was kicking lumps out of Inchie. And he came up to me and he says, Andy, he keeps kicking lumps out of me. And I went, all right, leave him to me. I'll sort him out. So I remember Glenn was ushering the ball back to his goalkeeper. And I thought, right, I'm having him now. This is a great opportunity. And as I took a swing at him to knock him, how he's running, your foot comes up behind you.
Yeah.
So instead of catching him on the calf, which I was aiming for, his boot came up. And I hit him full force on the bottom of his boot, on his 6 studs. In those days, they were aluminium. So it wasn't exactly the right thing to do. And I just felt my bones go right away. I thought, oh, Jesus. I managed to stay on and get the winner that day, by the way.
Well, I was going to say, that's one of them tackles as well, where there's no way you can go down injured after that. You've got to.
I know. So I've whacked him and I've gone, leave Inchie alone. All right. Oh, what are you doing, you big Scotch get? I said, no. Anyway, I said, thanks, Inchie. Yeah. You've done me now. I'm out for 8 weeks. And as we say, by the time I got back and time I was fit, listen, no matter how bad I felt or how upset I was, and never once did I pull Howard and say, what's happening? Never once. Because I couldn't. The numbers told us what was happening. They were unplayable at times, both of them, and together. So, it was for Inchie, it must have been devastating what happened against Sheffield Wednesday. Devastating.
Well, despite that, we obviously only lost one game from December until May that season. Unbelievable run, really. One goal that does stand out for us still is the one at Leicester where you pretty much nearly knocked the goal down after colliding with the post to score. and for me, and looking back at that and watching goals like that, it's definitely goals like that endears fans to you. For me, do you think that was that a big thing for you in terms of always making sure that you've done everything to get on the end of something? Obviously, we referred to the goal before.
Yeah, I mean, when I got there, and obviously Graham's still a great pal of mine. Graham was a player. I've always said when I arrived at Everton, Graham Sharp was a scorer of great goals. He wasn't a great goal scorer, and there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I used to say to Sharpie, you need to get 6 to 10 tap-ins in the 6-yard box. He never got them. And then he suddenly did start to get in there. He started to put himself in the 6-yard box, in and around the goalkeeper at certain areas. And suddenly his goal ratio went from 15 to 30 in a season, plus 30 plus. And I think that helped him. And I've always been a player like that. I was never a player who would score like Graham would score from 35 yards, like he did at Anfield that day.
Yeah.
I would, if I got one of them. I mean, I did at Leicester, got a very good goal from there.
Absolutely, you did. Absolutely.
By the way, my second one at Leicester was actually better than my first one.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
and that was with the old right peg swinger. But no, I didn't get many goals from outside the penalty area. I got all mines poaching in and around there on service from other people. And finishing things off. That was what I did, and that's what I try to get Sharpie to add to his game, and he did. To be fair to him, he took it on and he took his game to a new level. But yeah, I think that scoring goals like that, that one, that tap in, the one against Sittard, the first goal there, the important one at Goodison when Reedy had the shot, the goal he spilled it, and I just managed to toe poke it in. Goals like that they don't make headlines. They'll never be in a top 100 goals, but they count just the same. They count just the same as any other goal that's scored. So it's important to get them. And I spent my life getting goals like that. Yeah, they were a huge part of my appetite, is to make sure. And I didn't worry if I got hurt. That was incidental. If I got hurt and scoring a goal, I didn't care.
Well, we could obviously talk about this 84-85 season all night. I just want to ask in particular about about Neville. You mentioned him before about his growing influence. Some of the saves that season, particularly the one at White Hart Lane for Mark Falco, it's still replayed now whenever that season comes up. He'd go on to win numerous individual awards. How good was he?
Best in the world. I can't say any more than that. I remember doing an interview after the Tottenham game that night. And I said to, I think it was Martin Tyler, would you believe it, of all people, who was interviewing me that night. And I said to him, do you know what, Martin? It's not beating United 5-1 at Goodison that we did. It's not winning 4-0 at Goodison, 4-1 against Sunderland like we did. What wins you a title is what Neville Southall did tonight when we're hanging on for a bit and we're winning 2-1 and we need our goalie to make a save. And he does. That's what wins you a title. That's what got us the FA Cup. Neville saved against Tony Cascarino down at Gillingham, last few minutes in the second game, first replay, 1-on-1. Cascarino thinks he's putting his team through and Big Nev makes a save. The rest is history. He did it time and time again. Too often to be lucky. Yeah. He was a massive professional. I loved every bone in his body. We knew, as I said to you earlier, we knew that if we got one, we'd be hard pushed to lose a game. He didn't let in goals very often, Nev. He certainly didn't let in 2 in very often. But he was brilliant. To have that base and know that's behind you is brilliant. But he was, in my opinion, and everybody who played with him, and I think a lot of people even who didn't at that time, he was the best in the world.
There's going to be Evertonians listening to this in the car stereo on the morning run, and they're waiting for us to ask you. We've got to ask you. Bayern Munich at Goodison Park. So we go to Germany, we get 0-0. We come back. There's queues round the ground to get in. It's absolutely bouncing. Typical Everton. We go 1-0 down, but we fly out. We win the war. We win every individual battle that can be won in that park. We win. We score 3 goals in the second half. And there's Evertonians still now who say that's the greatest night of their lives. As a player on the pitch, what was that night like for you?
Best ever. Best ever. I've played in cup finals. I've played in European finals, as you know, played in FA Cup finals, played in Scottish Cup finals, played in League Cup finals, won them all. But if I'm going to the grave tomorrow, then I'm taking that game with me if it's the only one I can take.
Wow.
It's that night told you everything you needed to know about what Everton was and what the fans were. I've never seen Goodison like it before. I don't think I've ever seen it like it since. You guys are probably too young, but there was an energy about that place from a long time before kickoff, a long time. And whatever they told you the crowd was, I'd bet another 5,000-10,000 to it. And seriously, the whole place was bouncing. And Howard had done his magic in Munich. Sheedy and I were injured. Sheeds and I were injured. We didn't play in Munich, and he went in with a 5-man midfield again. Alan Harper brought in and Richard to do a job and did it brilliantly. And we got the draw that we wanted. I got the 0-0, but we were still massive underdogs. This was Bayern Munich. This was the creme de la creme of German football. This was, they don't lose to, dog and duck. We've never been in a European final, any of our boys. I'd been in a semi-final, I think, but that's about the closest any of us had ever been.
Yeah.
We're in a semi-final against, one of the top teams in Europe. And we're Everton. Not Everton as in Everton the name, but Everton and the players that were playing at it, because we just had no experience of what the only experience they had was the League Cup and the FA Cup semi-final. But they weren't, even though they were brilliant games, they were nothing like that night. We went in massive underdogs. They must have arrived there and thought, and looked at our team sheet and thought, well, we don't know any of these. I've never heard of Gray, Sharp. Who are these people? Who's Sheedy? He didn't play first game. Now, who is he? Plays left side. Well, okay then. Well, you just make sure. I can imagine them doing that. Who's Gray? What, 29? Oh, don't worry about him. He's done. We'll beat them. And I think, and it wasn't an arrogance that they had, it was a confidence in their belief, and they were right to have that confidence. But when we ran out, Jesus, the noise just, and we played well first half. We played really well first half. And there's one moment in the tape, I think you see it in Howard's Way, I don't know what, and to this day, I wonder how you guys would have felt about me if in my stupidity, when I got caught from behind and I swung round and lashed out at the guy with my right foot. Luckily, it was my right foot, which meant I missed him. Spun myself round about the halfway line and got up, and the ref booked me.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, after that, I thought, what were you doing? What on earth possessed you in Everton's biggest ever night in Europe to do what you did? And I have no idea. I have no answer. And had I caught him, and had I got sent off, and had we got knocked out, imagine how my life would have been.
It's not worth thinking about that, is
it?
It
isn't. But I didn't get sent off, and we didn't get beat, and we did go.
That's not the alternative ending we want to talk about.
Oh, no, I know. But it's true, isn't it? Imagine had I caught him and been sent off. Goodness me, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself.
But there was so many duels in that game. I think Peter Reid had a red sock because he went round kicking the Germans, and you yourself, you were fighting for Everton Football Club. And to answer that question, me as an Evertonian, and I know the generation before me, a little bit before me, loved what you did, fighting for the shirt. That would have been perceived as fighting for the shirt. It wouldn't have been stupidity. And those 11 players that night, in the second half, absolute heroes. My father-in-law still talks about that game when I go round. My grandfather-in-law, God rest his soul, he passed away at 96 this year. He talked about Bayern Munich. He didn't talk about Dixie Dean or the Holy Trinity. He talked Bayern Munich because it was such an amazing, amazing night. After the game, how on earth do you sleep? How do you go to sleep after a game like that?
You don't. No, we didn't. I think, apart from Reedy, we were all in the dressing room, obviously having a glass of champagne, whatever it was we were having in the dressing room, I'm not sure. But there was a few of us, like Shappy, myself, and a few of the lads lived over Southport, Formby way. And there was no way we were going to bed. And I think we ended up going out for a few drinks, then ended up back at my place to watch the game again. I'd taped it. Taped it. There you go.
That's old school.
I had taped it. And we sat up to the early hours. I was at the cup final. That might have been the European final. That might have been the Cup Winners' Cup final. We sat up at my house and watched it. Maybe we didn't. I think we went out. No, we went out at Goodison because it was only about 10 o'clock when the game finished, wasn't it? So it was plenty of time to go out. So I think we went back to Southport and had a night in Southport. But we're in the dressing room after that and we're going, come on, Reedy, get yourself ready. And Doc Evan comes in and goes, no, sorry, Reedy, no. We just gone, what do you mean no? He went, hospital for you. He went, what? He says, we need to get you in hospital just in case there's anything there. You'll have to stay in overnight. We're all going, see you, Reedy, all the best, man. So of all people, not to get out with us that night, Reedy ended up in hospital somewhere.
Wow.
Under observation the night we beat Bayern Munich.
Oh, God.
Wow.
Poor Reedy.
Before we get to the final, there was obviously a big week where we clinched the league. Firstly, it was the home game against QPR, which again a lot of the players talk about how crap it was that the league trophy wasn't there for you to actually parade that day. But you didn't lift it until a few days later when yourself and Zegsy were on the score sheets again, and you finally got your hands on our 8th league title. How special was that week? Obviously, you spoke about the Bayern Munich match and everything, but clinching the league title, talk us through that one.
Do you know, there are different emotions? And I tried to explain that on the day. I remember sitting in the bath, being interviewed with a glass of champagne after the game and being asked that question, how does it feel? And with the likes of Bayern Munich or a final, it's that one moment.
Yeah. That
one moment. So there's the emotion is so much stronger because you've only got 90 minutes to feel one way or the other. And that's it. There's no other chances. We had played nearly 42 games. Well, we hadn't played 42 games because we won it by a distance, I think. We won it by about 6 games to spare. Yeah. So we'd actually won it, let's say, after 36 games. And I think I sat in the bath and we were champagne and we're just sitting there, a lot of us. And it was nothing like Bayern Munich because, and I said to the guy, I said, well, it's it's really difficult. It's difficult to put into words 36 games.
Yeah.
From last August to May. Well, wouldn't have quite been May, would it? April, probably.
Yeah, it was May. It was May.
May, wasn't it?
That was May then, yeah.
Well, we clinched it in May. Must have been the beginning of May then.
It was early. It was early May. Yeah.
It must have been early May, very early May. And I said it's really difficult to put into words what the emotion is right now. It's one of satisfaction, and that's the one. Winning the league is the one that gives you longevity. Because there's no one can argue you're not the best team in the country. No one. It's there. Top of the league, Everton, by a distance. Second, who cares? So you have a long time to be proud of that and be passionate about it. But it's a different emotion to winning a cup. A totally different emotion. I think for me, the emotion of Bayern Munich in particular is untouched and would never be beaten. But the league achievement was greater because it took us 36 games to do it. Not one, not 2 90 minutes, but 36 90 minutes where we had to be at it nearly every game, particularly after the start of the season. So, so it was. It's a different feeling, but nonetheless, it's still a. When you're part of history, a club's history, it's wonderful, wonderful. No one can take it away from you. No matter how long you live for or how long, whether you're gone. We who walked out in Rotterdam will always be the first Everton players to ever play in a European final.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
it doesn't matter, and hopefully Everton will get to more European games and will get to more European finals and will win eventually another one. But we will be the first.
Always be the first, yeah.
And they're always, after that, first. And that's what makes it special for everyone who played that night.
Absolutely. But as you've just referred to then, there was obviously one more job to do, if you will, in that competition. The almost inevitable, it seems, victory against Rapid Vienna. Once again, you were on the score sheet. You just spoke about it then. The first European trophy itself. Did you feel... We've asked this question to everyone, and we know the answer, really. Did you feel pressure going into that, or was it that same type of, momentum, being so sure of yourselves at that point?
Never doubted we would beat them, even more than Watford the year before, even more. I remember me, Reedy, Sharpie and Inchie, before the final. Remember there was a trouble where they had to replay a game. Vienna had to play Celtic at Old Trafford.
The replay, yeah.
There was trouble. So the four of us decided to go and watch them. Obviously, we were going to play them in the final. So that's what we did in those days. We decided to jump in the car and drive across to Manchester and watch the game. And we got stopped halfway there by the police because they felt it was suspicious with four geezers driving out. I think it was a big fancy car. Somebody stopped us because they thought it was suspicious that four guys were driving a car. And I thought, cheeky muscles, that's ridiculous. But anyway, went and had a look at them. And we actually thought we were going to play Celtic. And I think that's why we went, because we didn't really know about Rapid Vienna, but we wanted to have a look at Celtic, if the truth be known. And Reedy's a Celtic fan. Anyway, so we decided to go and have a little look and get a heads up before the final. And we're surprised that Rapid Vienna won. But in many ways, I'm glad they won.
Yeah.
Because I always think that Scotland v England adds added pressure, and you're never sure. And it can go either way, as we've seen down the years with these games. Yeah. And I thought to myself, as soon as Rapid Vienna won that, I thought, that's it. We won this. They're not beating us. They can't beat us. I just knew they couldn't beat us. And I think most of the lads felt that as well. I think we felt confident we could beat Celtic. But there's always that Battle of Britain that would be put up as, here's another Battle of Britain, and this, that, and the other. And Andy Gray's a Rangers fan, and Graham Sharp's a Rangers fan, and Peter Reid's a Celtic fan, and all that sort of thing that was brought out. And I was really pleased, personally, on a personal note. I think we all were, and I think Howard was, that it was Rapid Vienna, because we really, really did know we were better than them.
You've been asked this question a million times, so I want to come at it from a different angle, if that's okay. So the Manchester United game in the FA Cup final, I mean, the Howard's Way documentary really explains a lot of rumours that you went to Chinatown and things with Derek Hatton, and that wasn't true, but that sort of follows that team round. And I think, and I know Gary agrees, that it's really unfair to the full stop on that season was the FA Cup final. So when you hear these things, and you still do, I'm saying it now, that you over-celebrated and that was the reason. Does that piss you off? Does that wind you up because it wasn't true?
Yeah, it winds me up a lot.
Yeah.
Because I work with a guy here in Qatar, Keezy, who's always winding me up about that.
Okay.
People said they're going to Chinatown. I'm thinking, I don't even think I was ever in Chinatown, ever, when I was at Goodison. Don't think I was ever there. And it's ridiculous. We could not have achieved what we did, particularly that season, the amount of games we played, and how deep we went in all competitions. And done that if we abused ourselves and didn't look after ourselves. Yes, when we coming back in the plane, and any fan who was on that plane will tell you that we're in there amongst the fans. You're not going to get pissed on a plane coming back on a Wednesday night.
Of course.
You know, we were allowed a couple of glasses of champagne. That was done. 2 or 3 glasses of champagne, lads. Thanks very much. That's it. And then everybody, to my knowledge, I did, went home and went to bed. Simple as that. And then tried to get ourselves ready for the midweek. But it was, I mean, what we were asked to do was ridiculous and would never ever be done again in modern game. You'll not be asked to play 2 finals in 3 days. Never. It will never happen. And it was ridiculous at the end of a season when you just had to look at Manchester United, how dead in their feet I felt they were in the second half last night.
Of course, yeah.
And they've had a little bit of preparation to get ready for that game. We had a final, flew home, stayed at home. I don't even think Howard took us in on the Thursday because we never got back to the airport till about 3 a.m. All went home. And then up we got Friday, travelled down to Watford to the hotel. Had a massage maybe before we went, pretty much so. Down to Watford. And then get ready for a massive thing to be. I mean, it's ridiculous. And had we been given 5-6 days rest, we'd have beat United. Because we were better than them as well that year. As we'd shown on quite a few occasions, 2 or 3 occasions that year. Absolutely. So I think we'd have beaten them if we'd have been fresher. So it was tough. But that I don't know where it started, the Chinatown thing. I have no idea. But listen, all you need to do is ask Derek Hatton. He'll tell you that never happened. It just didn't. I mean, I don't know if somebody sneaked away and went there. I have no idea. Can't speak for 15 players.
Yeah.
But I know that I can't think of anybody in that team that would have done that. There you go. With an FA Cup final 2 days away. There you go. That's my take on it. But for some reason, it kind of hangs around. But that was it. I think that everyone knew Howard and sadly what happened and how it affected him as well. And we did like enjoying ourselves. We absolutely like to enjoy ourselves.
Yeah.
But we did it at the right time. And we did it when it never... I mean, you don't win the English First Division by pissing about.
No.
You just don't. You don't add the Cup Winners' Cup to that by pissing about.
Nope.
You don't add an FA Cup final to that by pissing about. And I just think it's unfair on that team. And that's why Rob Sloman, who came to me many years ago and said, I want to do a movie because I don't think you lads ever got the credit you deserve. Yeah. And neither did Howard in many ways for that season. But it's it's one of those stories that will remain there. And listen, I don't really care, to be quite honest, because all the boys that were there know what we did and what we didn't do. It's as simple as that.
I think you look at the homecoming and you realise how bothered Evertonians were by that rumour. You were treated like heroes and absolutely rightly so. But we're coming to the end of a magical, amazing career for you at Everton Football Club. We've heard the story again in Howard's Way and other podcasts and shows that you've done, that you're seeing the Jaguar pull up at your brand new home in Formby, and by the time it drove off, you were no longer, or on the verge of no longer being, an Everton player. Can you tell us what happened? I mean, was there any chance that you could have resisted and fought this, or was it a foregone conclusion? And finally, to full stop that, do you have any regrets?
I mentioned to you earlier about Andy King and how if you asked Andy if he was still alive now, if he wishes he'd have stayed, I think he'd have said yes. Now, I said that because I made one huge mistake. Yeah, I probably made more than one. But one that people say, would you change anything in your career? And you say no, because it took you to where you ended up. And it was a hell of a journey. But I would change one thing, and I wouldn't have left Everton.
Okay.
I definitely would. I shouldn't have left. But I was angry. I was hurt. Really hurt. Really. After the season we'd had. And to be told that, and listen, as I said to you, John Bailey had to go through it. Andy King had to go through it. Other players, Terry Curran, had to go through it. Teams have to move on. But it was so soon after Rotterdam. You can imagine, or so soon after Wembley. It was within about, I don't know, it must have been a couple of weeks.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, all that euphoria of trying to push in there, what we achieved this year. Wow, it's been unbelievable. Can't wait for next season. And then to somebody, for Howard to come in with a big pin and just pop that balloon and say, no, actually, it's not going to happen. It was horrible. Now, Howard, he wanted me to stay. He said, I want you to stay. I don't want you to go. But yeah, I want you to tell you that I'm going to sign or try and sign Gary Lineker, and you won't start the season. And as I said to you, I was angry and hurt and disappointed. And I let that fuel my decision. And I shouldn't have done. I should have stepped back for about 4 or 5 days and realised that I was coming up for 30. I'd had 6 operations on my right knee. I'd had 2 great years, amazing years. And I loved the boys and I loved the club and everything about it. And that should have been enough for me to stay. And it would have been enough had I stepped back and forgot my anger and my disappointment and my hurt and taken 3 or 4 days to process it all. Then I should have stayed and would have stayed. But I guess pride is you either have it, you don't. And my pride was bruised, I think would be fair to say. And I thought, right, if you don't want me then, after the season I've had, then I better go play somewhere. And of course, I'd spent 4 or 5 years at Villa, knew the club well, still had family in the area. It was an easy move for me. And I think if it hadn't happened in a close season, I'm pretty sure people like Reedy and Sharpie and Inchy and the boys would have been saying to me, don't go, fuck off, don't go.
Yeah.
What are you doing? No, stay.
That,
even if you only play a bit part, stay. We want you here. We need you here. And I think they would have done. I think they'd have turned me around. And as I say, if it had taken 3 or 4 days, they wouldn't have needed to turn me around. I think I'd have made a different decision. And it was a wrong decision. And in the end, we say, do you regret that? But what it led to was a move to Rangers, the club that it's like you guys played for Everton.
Yeah, of course.
What would you have given to have done that?
Yeah.
You know, I ended up finishing my career playing for the club I supported all my life and winning the league with them. You know, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, the story is I should have stayed, and I wish I had stayed now, but these are amazing.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, for us, fortunately for us, Andy, and I say fortunately because I spent much of my younger football days, you know, idolising you from a different side of things as a commentator, co-commentator. You know, as part of the you know, magnificent Sky Sports as you know, as it came about, as the Premier League began in 1992. You know, did you ever envisage, you know, when you entered that and, you know, Super Sunday became what it was and Monday Night Football and everything, did you ever envisage the Premier League and that those shows becoming as iconic as they were?
No, not really. Not really. I don't think we knew what was going to happen. That was, I mean, first of all, I mean, the day that the deal was done and the figure of, I think it was 360 million for the contract that had been worth 30 million last time. I mean, it was mind blowing even back then. It sounds nothing now when you're talking about 3 billion just for UK rights and 3 other billion for worldwide rights. You're talking about over 6 billion for the Premier League. It's nuts. It's absolute nuts. There's no doubt that the Premier League and I think the coverage helped make a lot of footballers very, very wealthy young men. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Yeah. You know, had we made a mess of the coverage, then who knows where it would have been, but we didn't. But it was brilliant. Listen, I'm not going to sit here, much as I dislike the company that did what they did to me. For the first 20 years, I mean, certainly the first 10, I was given carte blanche, basically, to here you go, this is it. You're doing all the games. We're thinking of new shows. We're going to do this, and you'll be doing that. And the way we moved the analysis on, the way we did, was brilliant. And that's, you know, that was down to a pal of mine who was our boss, a guy called Andy Melvin, who had all these ideas. I remember the thing, you won't remember it probably, there was a show called The Boot Room in the very early days of Sky.
I do remember.
I did it, and I had a Subbuteo table in front of me. We had a mocked up dressing room, and I used to get somebody to come in and talk about tactics and things, and we used to move the Subbuteo around. But that was born in Glasgow, at the Holiday Inn in Glasgow, when I was sitting with Andy Melvin when I was playing for Rangers my last year. And we'd had a few beers, and there was about 3 or 4 of us there, and there was a lot of empty beer bottles on the table. And he started asking me about systems and formations. So I shifted all the beer bottles away. I said, right, and I got the beer bottles out, and we went through systems and what happens here and what happens when you play a 3 and 4, and put it away in his mind. He thought that was fascinating. And then about, what would it have been, 4 years later, 5 years later, he came to me when he was my boss at Sky and said, remember that night in Glasgow we used those beer bottles to shoot? He said, yeah, well, I want you to do that on telly. I said, we can't put beer bottles on telly. I said, don't do that. He went, oh, this is fucking stupid. He says, no, I want you to get a Subbuteo table, but I want you to get people in on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and do, I don't know whether it's half an hour or an hour. Might have been an hour, because we had to fill a lot of stuff in those days, so it would have been an hour. And he said, I want you to sit for an hour and talk tactics with people, talk about the game, get them to show us what they think and everything like that. And I thought, okay then. So big pressure, but we did it, and the boot room evolved. And then we did Monday Night Football. And I was doing the commentaries first. And then he came to me and said, I want you to change your role on Monday. I want you to come in the studio with Keezy, and I want us to make it a big analysis show. And I remember I used to put the tapes in myself. You guys are too young to remember that as well, but we used to get one of the young guys running with the tape, and I put the tape in, and people used to say, you don't work that, you don't run that. But I did. I worked everything. I had to put it in, press it, make sure it was all parked at the right place, and then run it, and had a machine to stop it and draw on it and what have you. Very basic compared to what they've got now, obviously. Yeah. But that was a start, and it was great fun. Great fun.
It was amazing to watch, honestly, because I'm at Monday Night Football. You tune in for the first hour before the game to just see the analysis.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I used to have to go on a Monday. I'd be in the office at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'd sit with some of the young boys, and we'd go through every goal, every game of the weekend, and I had to get the right bits, right, park it there, do that there. Okay, that's why we need that. So I had to spend about 3 or 4 hours of the day before you even went on air, getting all these tapes at the right spot and remembering when I went on air what I was going to say about it. So, but it was great fun, and I didn't think I'd enjoy it because I loved commentating in games, being there live, and taking me off the game on a Monday. I thought, oh, but you know, I knew Andy Melvin for years, and he didn't make many bad decisions, and he knew his stuff. And that was another amazing decision from him to say, right, you know, Monday Night Football in America. I said, yeah. I said, well, that's what I want here. We're going to make it Monday Night Football here, proper football, and off we went. And I mean, it was like it was great. It's wonderful.
It's apparent listening to you, Andy, how much love and affection that you have for Everton Football Club. And we came calling again in 1997. Now, there's lots of untold truths, there's lots of rumours out there. Looking at the research and my memories, it was very much the club were pushing the narrative that Andy Gray was going to be the Everton manager. Andy Gray wanted a certain player to come in and play up front for Everton Football Club. I think you've had interviews in the past where you've touched upon this, but what actually happened? Because at one point it looked like you were going to be the Everton manager, and that we've had Alan Myers on the podcast, who was the head of communications at the time in 1987, and we asked him about that era, and he said that he was there when he found out that you were staying at Sky, and that pushed Everton into domino mode to go quickly for Howard Kendall and things. But from your point of view, your side of things, why were you not the Everton manager in 1997?
Okay. The simple fact of the matter was, I was never offered the job.
Okay.
Ever. Right? So I never got a call from Peter Johnson saying, Andy, I want you to be Everton manager. Not once. Right? I got a call and was asked to go meet Peter in the Wirral. Do they have a food factory in the Wirral?
Park Foods.
Yeah. Park Foods.
I would have been there. And with a couple of the lads from his board. Can't remember the names.
Be Clifford Finch, would it?
Cliff was there. And when I left home, I said to my partner at the time, when I come back, I think I'll be Everton's manager.
Oh.
Okay? So I left home with that in mind. And that was my train of thought as I drove up the M6. I thought they were asking me to be the manager. Because if you remember, we were now 3 or 4 months without a manager.
That's right, because Joe Royle had been sacked in March, and this was now June or July.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're coming into pre-season, and they haven't even got a manager sorted out yet.
Yeah.
Right. So that was a big, hold on a minute, that was a big red flag as to what Peter Jones was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? How can you wait this long? Who's going to sort out a pre-season? So I went and met them, and we talked for ages, and it was all hypothetical, as Peter said to me. This is obviously a conversation, Andy. It's a hypothetical conversation about if you were manager of Everton, what would you want to do and what would you do? So we talked about it. If I was manager of Everton, I'd like to do this, 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 and this. Do this, this. Who would you get in? Look for players like this. I mean, they throw things at you. Who would you get in? You haven't even thought about this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you. But there were types of players that I told him I'd like.
Yeah.
It sort of mirrored a lot of the, what I knew and how I played football and how I watched football played and how I played it at Villa and Everton. That was the way I wanted football to be played if I was ever going to be a coach. So we sat for hours and we talked hypothetically about that. And I seriously thought they were going to say at the end, so here's the deal. This is what we want. And I was flabbergasted when he turned around and says, okay, Andy, well, thank you. We've got 2 or 3 others to talk to. And I went, wow, okay. Okay. Now, I left, and had he offered me a contract there and then, I'd have signed it. And I thought, be damned with what Sky think. And I'd have had to face up to the consequences, which wouldn't have been easy. But I'd have done it. Signed it. Went home. Part says, well, I said, well, nothing. They're going to talk to other people and then get back to me. That following day, I was travelling away. They knew that. To go to La Manga, to play in a footballers' classic golf tournament with lots of my peers there, all guys that knew me and had heard rumours, and they're all saying, you must be mad. You've got the best job in the world where you are. Why do you want to go and be a manager? Things like that. I had a young child who I saw every weekend, Sophie, my youngest daughter, could only have been, so she'd have been 92, she was born.
She was 5.
She's 30 this year, so...
Because she'd been 5 at the time.
Yeah, there you go. So she was 5 and I only saw her every weekend. So that would have been really difficult. I hadn't thought about these things through. I hadn't thought them through. Because I was blinkered by the fact if he offers me the job, I'm taking it, and then I'll have to deal with everything as and when. So all this started to happen. But while I was in La Manga, and of course, the last thing Peter Johnson said to me was, of course, Andy, all these talks will remain in these 4 walls. I said, I'm not telling anyone, Peter. It's not my interest to tell anyone. And why would I want to?
Yeah.
Nothing's been decided. Each day I picked up a paper in La Manga, there was another story about what we talked about, people we had talked about. And I'm thinking, interesting. I'm not told anyone these stories. They're coming from somewhere. And there were only 5 people in that room, I think. 4 or 5 people in that room. So somebody was telling the press or leaking the press stories about what we had talked about. And that was giving Evertonians a huge amount of an uplift. Because they were like you said, and I get it. That, oh, Andy's coming back. He's going to coach the club. He's going to manage the club. I wasn't offered the job, and I keep saying that to Evertonians. I wasn't. Now, when I got back to England, of course, I got a call from Sky, and they said to me, "You're not going, even if they do offer you the job." I said, "Well, can I talk about it?" He said, "No." He says, "We'll make life as difficult as possible for you, and we're determined to keep you." And then I said, "Okay." And that was it. That was it. I got they offered me a new contract there and then, as they would, because they wanted to protect me and they wanted to keep me. They did. Then, of course, I get the stories from Peter, Andy's turned us down. I mean, no, nothing could be further from the truth. Now, I think in hindsight, it would have been the wrong time for me, because I don't think Peter was quite aware of the massive job that needed to be done there and the kind of money it might have taken to put it right. And that showed after it, of course, when Howard took over for the 3rd time. It was a tough time for him. And I think it was the right club at the wrong time. But when I left home that day, I was convinced I was coming back home manager of Everton. I wasn't offered the job. I was never offered the job. Now, people say, well, they were going to offer you. I said, well, yeah, they might have been, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that. No one picked up a
Do
phone
you
and
think?
said to me,
Do you
"We
think
want you
Peter
to manage
Johnson?
this."
Do you
Sorry?
think Do you think Peter Johnson was a little bit scared by your plans in terms of how ambitious you maybe were?
He
Is
did
that a
balk at.
possibility?
He did balk at the amount of money I asked him I might need the first year. Not for me, but for players.
Yeah.
And he kind of went, "You what for one player?" I said, "No." I said, "We might get 2 or 3 for that." And he went, "Well, okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, what was the point of anyone going to Everton and not having big plans? I mean, I was there at the most successful time ever, and if I was going to go there, it would have been to try and replicate it or get as close to it. I mean, I don't think anyone will get as close to Howard, but I would like to have. If I was going there, it would have been with all the tools available to have a shot at it. But as I said, Peter Johnson never offered me the job, never. And I think it's just one of those stories. Peter needed it at the time to deviate the flak away from himself, and I was a fair target for him.
Yeah, it was very clever from the club. I remember at the time, I'm definitely unfair on you, but I remember it being leaked that you'd rejected the job. And you obviously haven't. I mean, thank you so much for the exclusive of giving it to us at Across the Park podcast. We appreciate it. But now we know these things. You're looking back to 1987, you're thinking, good God, that club was a mess. And we feel so sorry. We've said this on our podcast. We feel so sorry for Howard Kendall having to come back for a third time. And he should have been in Mallorca enjoying the fruits of his labour instead of fighting on the last game of the season to keep Everton alive. It was an absolute mess. And I think probably if you'd have came back and failed, you'd be sitting here now on a different podcast, having a different opinion.
Yeah, probably. No, it was a shame for her, and it shows you the level of. They should have been ready and prepared and had things lined up, because, as you say, Joe left in March, and they had millions of time. Like Dave Waggy went in, didn't he?
Yeah, for 6 weeks. Yeah,
Waggy went in just to see the season out and that. And I don't know why they never contacted people that they wanted, like me. I mean, I didn't know. I got a call through another commentator who set up the meet. Otherwise, I would have never have known anything about it. So when it didn't happen with me, and when I went, they obviously thought, well, that's it. We'll give it to Andy. Well, if they'd have given me on the day, it might have been a totally different history. Might have been different, but they didn't. And lots of other things came up in the next 10 days that, as I said, I made the decision to leave without thinking, without giving it thought. And I wish I hadn't. When Howard decided to not sell me, he offered me the chance to go, and I took it when I shouldn't have. But this time, I was going up there to do exactly the same if I'd been offered the job, and that was take it and damn the consequences. But I didn't get offered it. And in the next 10 days, many things happened to turn me from that blinkered first day, I'm taking this, to, there's a lot more problems here than I thought.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were Peter.
Look, it's been a great podcast. We appreciate your time. We're not going to end it on you leaving Everton and you not being Everton manager. We're going to end it on 2 very, very positive questions. First of all, Howard's Way. You must be so proud of not only being part of that team, but being part of that project.
Oh, it was wonderful. I said to you earlier, but Rob Sloman, whose brainchild it was, he called me years ago, and said I'd known Rob. He got in contact with me with something totally different from this, and we got pally and we stayed in contact. And then he said, I've got an idea. What do you think? I thought, it's a fantastic idea. Of course. What do you think? That would be wonderful. But I never thought it would be as good as it was. I mean, he deserves so much credit, Rob, for not only putting it together, but the financing of it, the making of it was fabulous, because it wasn't. There's a story about Liverpool as a city as well in there as well.
Of course.
And what the 80s was like at Liverpool, and that's Derek Hatton plays a big part in that in the mid 80s, and it's like a story of Liverpool as a town's history, not just Everton's, but then you go on to the football and Howard Kendall, and it's wonderful. I said on the night that I thought it was a a fitting tribute to Everton's greatest ever manager, and I stand by that. It was it is a fitting tribute to Howard. And I've watched it a couple of times, of course I have. If I'm ever feeling a bit flat, on it goes. And it just makes the hairs on the back of your neck just stand up again. So many different complex characters that go to make a team. I mean, we weren't all the same. You know, some were like me and Reedy out there, little extrovert, and the way we went about. Others were quiet. Derek Mountfield, quiet lad. Trevor Stephen, quietish. You know, Kevin Sheedy, quiet but funny with it. You know, there was a whole mix of personalities in there, but somehow it all worked. It all worked. And Howard's Way is a wonderful tribute to our manager.
It was absolutely, and tribute to you and your teammates as well, because that year, I mean, we're not old enough really to have travelled around the country and travelled around Europe to watch you guys, but we appreciate it. We've grew up on the stories, but this podcast, Andy, is going to go around the world, around the country, to Evertonians who travelled around the country, travelled around Europe, supporting you, supporting the team. Have you got a message for the Evertonians that are listening to this podcast?
Yeah, keep the faith. We've had a difficult season with this pandemic. It promised a lot at the beginning, and we've disappointed a little as the season went on, particularly our home form. Our away form, you can't argue with. It's been sensational, absolutely right up there. It's title-winning away form. If you look at it, I think it's only Manchester City got a better away record than Everton. Yeah. And I think it's a time where we have to allow our manager, hopefully, with the funds that are available, to strengthen the squad and make it even better. And I think next season will be better. And it would be wonderful if next season he could clinch European football. And I think he can. I think Carlo's a brilliant coach with bags of experience. And I hope he gets the backing that he'll need in the summer, because we're a bit away. We still need strengthening. The group needs to be beefed up a bit in numbers. And if he can do that in the summer, then I think that we Evertonians can look forward to a pretty good season next year.
Fingers crossed. That sounds good to me. Mr. Andy Gray, it's been an absolute pleasure to walk down memory lane with you. There's been times that the hairs on my arms have been standing up. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Across the Park podcast.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Gary.
Cheers, Andy. Thanks a lot, mate.